welcome to another edition of Maximum Growth Live. I'm one of your hosts, Jay Ruane, CEO of FirmFlex, your social media and social funnels agency for lawyers, as well as CEO, and now just CEO of Ruane Attorneys, a criminal defense and civil rights firm here in Connecticut. With me, as always, my man, Seth Price, down there in the Blue Shark / Price Benowitz arena. He is the founder, one of the two founders of Price Benowitz, your DC, Maryland, Virginia, and South Carolina law firms, as well as one of the founders of Blue Shark Digital, SEO for lawyers, with hundreds and hundreds of clients all over the great United States of America. As always, we are here every Thursday live on Maximum Growth Live, where we talk all about how to grow your firm. And as we enter the last few weeks of 2021, some people are excited to see it leave. Some people are excited for a brand new year. And Seth, first thing I gotta ask you, as always, how's your week going?
Week's going okay. We made it through Thanksgiving, both sets of grandparents in the house under one roof. And, no need for law enforcement. So I take that as a win.
Well, that's good. I'm actually doing our second Thanksgiving this coming Saturday. We'll be going to cut down our Christmas tree with my wife's side of the family. And instead of the normal pizza joint that we usually go to, we've decided that we're going to have a whole nother Thanksgiving with that whole side of the family. So my Thanksgiving,
not bring them together. You kept them separate but equal.
Separate but equal. Yes, absolutely. My mother-in-law and her boyfriend were down in Florida, like we talked a little bit last week, for the closing of the High Life Renaissance. So it's our first opportunity to really get everybody together. So we're looking about it, and it brings up a point I was reading online, and I wanted to talk to you about it because I think it's something that is something worth considering, right? And the question is, would you go back now? And this is the context for the question. It is the end of 2021, despite the fact that we've got Omicron, whatever you want to call it, coming up next. I look back on my firm and where we sit today, and I look back at our numbers and how we were functioning in February of 2020, right? It's all these. We've been in like this pause for forever, and I'm wondering to myself, and I'm wondering how you would answer this question, given what you know now. Would you go back?
Absolutely. We were on a trajectory. Like, there was a lot of positives. There was just, I want to say, more certainty. We were on a great track. That said, I can't say that it's not like a everything or nothing. Huge improvements. We've talked through half of them on the show. We've done things that have brought in diversity from international help. We've looked at profitability. We took a deep breath and took a stock of what we're doing, all of which I hope we would have done some of those things had it not been for the virus, but we were fat and happy and rolling when this thing hit. And it was, we were an embarrassment of riches. Again, after some humbling time and some nice PPP money, I feel like we are not hurting in any way. And we probably are going to hit revenue numbers that are higher than we had before. But had this not hit, I think we would have been even further along, and certainly without the pain and uncertainty and awful loss of life that we've seen over the last couple of years.
Yeah, for me, we're in a situation where, how do I say this? We were in a good place revenue-wise prior to COVID. We had some of our best weeks ever. But I think we were sort of stunted in our growth in the old ways. Not that we hadn't, we had some legacy employees that had been with us for a while that have left on their own accord during COVID for a number of different reasons. That may or may not have happened without COVID, but I think we really positioned ourselves well. So I don't think I would necessarily go back. I'd love to get back to the revenue. We're not there yet. We had a terrible third quarter.
That's what I was answering, right. Which was, we were seeing numbers. And again, I think we are now at or above, but we would have been with 2 years of knowing everything we know and building and growing. It definitely was not an advantage. Blue Shark certainly did well. So personally, net, where am I? I think that, a little yin yang, but, more eyes on digital. which was good for Blue Shark, good for Price Benowitz, for a firm based on digital. But look, I'll be blunt, the criminal defense world with two things, one of which I approve of, which is the prosecutorial reform, getting rid of, at least in our market, some of these awful prosecutors. They were very good for business, but they were awful for humanity and for the minority community that was hit most hard by them. It was awful. And so thankful that those changes have happened, but the combination of the new normal, people's new patterns of how they go out, legalization of drugs that have sort of taken a foothold during this time, the lack of arrests in many things that were sort of the key revenue drivers for a criminal defense law firm. I think it's probably good for society, but certainly not positive as far as revenue and growth of a criminal defense firm.
No, it definitely has. And one of the things that I was happy about, is that we did diversify, a few years ago and started getting to civil rights work, and the case resolution values that we're seeing there are a little higher because you can walk into a pretrial and you're not getting what you were getting years ago, that everybody loves the police. Now it's not necessarily as easy for the police departments to get away with some of their scurrilous behavior. And you've got, magistrates and judges saying, hey, this may not fare so well if it goes the distance. So that sort of has helped us. But, if we could solve the revenue issue, and I think we're getting there. We're getting there. I mean,
I understand, but the quick clearly goes to the point that you didn't have a revenue issue 2 years ago,
right?
And you do now. So again, we talked a lot on the show about diversity, and I'm glad that you diversified into civil rights. But it's definitely been, for those people, our PI practice booming better than ever. Family law. I wish anybody listening, if you want to practice family law in the DC metro area, we have opportunity. There's so much case value that I leave on the table every day. So all those things great, but criminal has definitely been a grind.
Awesome. So that leads me to the next question that actually came up in one of the forums, and it deals with digital, and it deals with different practice areas. And the question becomes, is it better to have one website with multiple practice areas or individual websites for each practice area? So I know you have an opinion. I have an opinion.
Look, until about a year ago, we talked about this regularly. And I think or maybe pre-COVID, this was a hot topic and people had bigger fish to fry, so to speak. But it's something I think a lot about. I study, A/B test. And the answer, like everything, depends, right? But I'll say the following. The way I built my firm, and as you know, I have a gazillion different websites. That's not for the faint of heart. I have my own internal operation to support that. And part of the reason I started an agency was, at the time, let's say I had 20 sites, maybe I have 40 now. I didn't want to pay somebody $3,000 or $4,000 per site, even at a wholesale rate, to manage those. So that's, by having the internal things, you can do things you can't do otherwise. In general, from an SEO point of view, one site is generally superior in that you're dividing and conquering with multiple sites, right? Mm-hmm. Every time you build a link, if it's one site, that site builds authority. But if you have multiple sites, then you have to say, you got on the news, CNN puts you on. Where's that link going? Is it going to your criminal site? Is it going to your civil rights site? Going to your family law site? Whatever it is, you have to make those choices. So first, from a purely SEO point of view, I love one site. And that is the way I am pushing both myself and clients and building that authority. Now, the next best thing would be a second site, maybe not a whole family of sites, but let's say you have a family law practice. And this is what happened to me, right? It would make a lot more sense. Price Benowitz is a really good domain with a very high domain authority, has great traction. But from a conversion point of view, my feeling is if somebody needs a family law lawyer, generally, if somebody does nothing but family law, that's going to be a conversion factor. Same with criminal. So I took the extra effort to build what some people used to call microsites, but in my case, I thought, they were just another website for each lawyer getting a website. If you're willing to put the resources in, which I did, and it may take you over a year to get out of the sandbox and be competitive, but if you're willing to put the resources in, having that standalone site with the name of the practice and the URL, not, for example, Ruane Attorneys / family or criminal, but literally in the URL where I have Capital Family Law Group, when you have something with family in it or with divorce in it, those are powerful signals to Google. This is not just a subcategory, it's the main one. And when you're able to say, this is what my site is about, very clearly, there's an advantage, both from a conversion and from Google. That said, just to give you an example, Price Benowitz, which I use primarily for my PI med malpractice, has, because of our jurisdiction, we have DC, Maryland, Virginia, all within a stone's throw. And because of that, we are forced to have basically a URL of Price Benowitz that doesn't really have a main calling card, because we have /DC injury, Maryland and Virginia. And each of those rank number one or in the 3 packs are exceptionally well-ranked landing pages, but they're not the homepage. So it shows it can be done. And so again, it depends. The final thing I will say is that if you in fact have an area that is not congruous with another area, that's where you don't want to show people that you do certain types of law. That's when you need a second site. Forget about SEO, just from you don't want to be able to sort of, let's say, you are doing, I'll give you an example I had, which is you're doing criminal defense, but you also want to be able to get the PI case from somebody who was hit by a DUI driver, which case may be worth a lot more. That's an example where you may choose to have the two because you don't want them to be at odds. There are plenty of examples like that.
Sure. So let me give you my opinion on this, because I tend to agree with you, Seth, for a lot of things. But
Wow.
you know me, well, there's always a little bit, there's always a but there. I'm really big into the branding, as you know, and we have tied ourselves to a lot of branding. So when we started off something like our speeding ticket practice, I didn't want it to negatively impact our things. So I created not only a separate site, I created a whole brand that went with it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But then we're saying the same thing. Yes, yeah. Because you don't want the guy who's coming to you for a federal case or for some high-level civil rights thing. That's the speeding ticket guy. Right. It killed me. It's hard to be known for everything. I walked through one of the big, majestic law firms, top 10 DC firm, and this lady introduced me to her guy as, oh, this is the guy who handles DUIs. And I'm like, no, please send me your catastrophic PI cases. And it's like, so yes, 100%. And look, but as you know, it takes a lot less to win traffic tickets than if you were going for car accidents.
Oh, absolutely.
And because of that, when you're going for something that doesn't going to take that much love, that's where the separate site has less of an SEO cost, because just by putting some content on, even though you don't fancy yourself an SEO, you were able to get real results. And by branding that name and getting that name, you didn't know this at the time perhaps, but that the GMB, the Google My Business component, popped because those terms work. And when they just, I'm going to pivot to an episode of the SEO Insider. I can't remember if we simulcast it with Darren Shaw. He does an annual rankings of what's working and what's not working in local SEO and local search. And I think very top of the list, it wasn't one, it was two, was keywords in the brand name. So by doing that, you fell into something where how many people are fighting for speeding tickets? I'm sure there are a few,
but not many.
But not enough, and you'll get a bite at the apple and not destroy the rest of your brand. So I love it.
Yeah, so that's really what we did, and I think if you're gonna set up multiple websites, there's a couple of things that you need to know going into it. Number one, what's your branding play? Is it just going to be a second website with your name focused on a different area? Well, if your name is becoming synonymous with your major practice area, that could hurt down the line, because people start to not really understand where to send, what kind of cases you want, number one. And number two, you have to commit to it. You can't just put up a 5-page secondary site and just expect the cases to roll in when your main site has hundreds of pages and is seeking out links and that type of thing. And some people think, oh, it's just going to set up another site. It's no big deal.
No, I said from SEO, that's a different case. But I'll tell you that I think there is an advantage for that 5-page site if it's a referral-based practice and you're a title attorney. This is a question again. Right. Somebody's a title attorney. Have a separate title site with nothing else on it. So you could do your B2B work. Here's my title card. Here's, super Paragon title, and you're in, and you're not going to SEO it, but you don't want it to be. If Ruane attorneys don't want them going to see you do DUIs and title, like here's my title business, it's separate.
Yeah, it's funny. Years and years ago, I had to step in and resolve a case that my father was handling, and the client was complaining that, oh, this guy's just a speeding ticket lawyer. And I was like, my father's beaten 12 death penalty cases. This is, your son's accused of a crime. I think he can handle it. But the father was, because we had him as the face of speeding tickets for a while, and so that was a problem. But okay, what I'm going to do right now, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about a few more issues that we see going into 22. So, folks, sit back, relax, get yourself a drink, and we'll be right back with more Maximum Growth Live. Hi, I'm Jay from FirmFlex, and I want to let you in on a foolproof way to drive viable clients through your door via social media, using a social funnel. You see, social media is a different type of marketing, and using the wrong methods won't land you clients. It will turn people off to your brand. But there's a way to get those clients to opt in, learn more about you, learn why you are great, and then want to contact you, whether you handle trust and estates, or family law, or personal injury, or any other type of law. And that's using a multiple-stepped funnel that delivers the right message at the right time. You can get that message with a FirmFlex social funnel. A FirmFlex social funnel is the way to drive qualified leads into your client base. Our funnel program gives you the ultimate control over your new client funnel. We design, implement, and set up all the triggers for a multi-step funnel, bringing attention to your brand and slowly warming potential clients from cold to red hot and ready to engage. And the best part is, you can start the whole process right online. Visit getfirmflex.com today.
In this world today, if you want to grow your business, you want to grow your firm, you want to take on more cases and make a bigger impact, you have to have a digital blueprint. Statistically, throughout the time that we've been working with Blue Shark Digital, our law firm, the Atlanta Divorce Law Group, grew over 1,400%. They truly understand where we're headed and how we want to get there. I have a team in Blue Shark Digital that I feel like has my back.
And we're back with more Maximum Growth Live. Seth, I want to talk to you. It's now December. We only have a few weeks left in the year, and a lot of us are looking towards a good 2022. We've been limping through the last couple of years, but 2022 is going to be my year, right? So tactically, to grow my firm, is there an area where you think that a person should be focusing on in December, right, to set you up for great growth in 2022?
Oh, it's interesting. I thought you were going somewhere else with this. I thought you were going to discuss like cutting expenses.
We'll do that next.
Okay. So where to go for growth? Look, I think it's consistent with what we're talking about. I don't think you do for myself, I've looked introspectively during 2021 and continued to cut. And I know I have one or two cuts left to make. There are areas I want to expand in, and it's tough. And it's two steps forward, one step back. We're doing well. We've made a bunch of hires, and then somebody gets sick within division that's helping us with hires. And it's putting your map in place of where you want to be. And I think strategically doing that. And you know what, I'll take a page out of the John Morgan playbook, which is the big, hairy, audacious goals. Having some of those. I have, I've been noodling around and talking to you offline about, a business concept that an underserved area in my mind that I think is good. And it's sort of like, what can you do that will move the needle forward? And I don't think it's because it's December. I mean, you could do it any time, but it's taking stock of where you are coming from and where you are heading to. That December is a great time to sort of, use as reflection as well as planning.
Yeah, for me, December has always triggered a few things. And one is sort of trying to get my feet underneath me to go in to start the new year really strong. And one of the things that I like to do in December is look back on the people who've referred us cases over the course of this year. And so what I do is we have a spreadsheet. I have one of my assistants make sure they get all the phone numbers of those people, and I'll just dial every day and leave voicemail messages for people. Hey, just want to thank you. I'll admit it. There's a company out there called Slide Dial, which allows me to connect directly to somebody's voicemail and not necessarily get them to pick up. So it's a trick out there for people in the audience. Slide Dial. I think it's 267 SLYDIAL, and then you input their number and it goes right to their voicemail. I love it. But I want to reestablish those connections with people in December, and then that way I can make sure to sort of keep those referrals coming in the first part of the year, because it's too easy for us to sort of refuse to admit the success that other people have played, the part that other people have played in our success. And it's a great time to sort of reflect, as you're stopping off at holiday parties and the like, you see a lot of people, and establishing those personal connections, I think, can drive business your way in the following year.
I think that's what we saw decimated during COVID when you weren't out, the referral business. And look, you made more money. Part of the reason I think you stayed in the game at the courthouses as long as you did was the serendipity and sort of that X factor that helped build your practice. Despite non-exceptional SEO, you still had a killer freaking practice. And part of that was you were larger than life. You were at the courthouse. Yeah. You went to bar events and had a booth. You did stuff outside the box. People loved you and connected with you. That was much, much harder. And I think we saw that the people that had referral-based practices really suffered during COVID.
Yeah, and the other thing I do that you actually suggested on one of our very first shows is I use December as what I call cut month. And so what I'll do is I'll take my October, November, December Amex bills, and I'll go through and I'll look for every single recurring transaction. And I'll look at every vendor that I can, maybe negotiate with. And we'll start to see, if I signed for some software that I'm not really getting the best use out of, let's cut that. And what can we do to sort of, reevaluate our cell phone plans and our internet plans and all of those little things. One year, we realized we had cable TV going into all the offices, and we got a YouTube TV. So, well, at one point it was Sling, but a YouTube TV subscription and some streaming sticks. And that was a lot cheaper than having cable TV running into all of our different offices. And so it's things like that where you can identify, hey, I'm saving $1,000 here. Then it's $1,500. Next thing you know, and inevitably we find that we're saving ourselves anywhere between $2,000 and $7,000 a month sometimes, because we've been able to be aggressively cutting things. You suggested a great idea early on in one of our shows to swap out the credit cards and say no new charges, and then see what was hitting. Because some of these things, unfortunately, are you pay once a year for a subscription, and then next November it hits and you didn't cancel it, and now you've gone 2 years paying for something you're not really using. So let's recapture that money.
I love it, and I appreciate it. I just got one of those 12-page things where I'm like, you and I talk, sometimes I'm more concerned about the double and triple miles for certain types of charges on the credit card for points than I am making sure we're still using it. Look, absolutely still goes line by line of that. I'm going to set up a meeting with both my companies to make sure we go through that. But what's interesting, I'll sort of is one thing just that I remember suggesting it. I remember doing that at the beginning of COVID, like, oh shit. And we again, during COVID, it was not easy, but places like Salesforce were like, yeah, take a 6-month holiday. It was crazy what certain companies did to help us get through it. It was really awesome. And those are companies you're not going to forget. But one of the things that, just to note to self, when you cut the credit card, if that's what you're doing, note that if you have anything set up through PayPal, that's a hole in my plan. And I was like, how am I still paying for this? And it was because PayPal just gets the new credit card and keeps going. It doesn't. So just check what's on a recurring PayPal if you use that. I had a couple things there, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm still paying for that.
Yeah. Oh, see, these are the types of things. This is why we talk to you folks, because these little things can add up to big dollars. I was always told if you watch the pennies and nickels, the dollars add up for themselves. So that's really what we want to talk about here. We're ending the year strong. Any resolutions, Seth? I'm putting you on the spot. I didn't tell you I
Well,
was going to
it's not
ask
a
this question.
resolution. I have been focused so heavily on the international build out, particularly for intake. It was humbling in the sense of when you lose 4 people that you didn't want to lose, and you realize the economics have just changed. It wasn't a
Yeah.
terrible place to work. The manager they're reporting to was perfectly lovely. They lost the esprit de corps of coming to the office, but when wages went up 30% and there's no buzzer going off to let you know that, and you don't have an A+ manager, but you have a B+ manager who manages but doesn't have the wherewithal to raise his hand and say, dude, this is not just a coincidence, you need to change things with that. So that's I would like to figure out how to scale that to me there is something there.
I think there's definitely some opportunity there. I mean, legal intake is more than just taking a message. I mean, we could talk to Gary about that, for hours. And I mean, his experience is wide, but his focus right now, is helping lawyers, do better at the intake process. But I really think that there is a market to be made in being able to offer people who are trained who are overseas people trained in the legal intake process, and getting to know the people that we've hired and put on intake. They are interested in it. They understand it. They're not, they understand. Okay, I'm going to be an intake person, and not everyone wants to be an intake person, but those who do,
Right.
really gravitate towards it. And
And
I think I definitely think that you're onto something with that.
and look, our early days of intake, we used a lot of recent college grads who wanted law school. And look, law school is less desirous than it's ever been, right?
Yep.
You lost the ability for the brass ring top dollar jobs has shrunk dramatically. There's so many opportunities out there that the best and brightest aren't all going to law school. Some are,
Right.
but not in the same numbers. And we were left with people that needed a job rather than were passionate about it. And what I have seen is that there's an educated population internationally that is, if I can get beyond the 4 quadrants of DC and look beyond that, there are solutions to our problems. Then that's sort of my piece. How about you? What are you looking forward to in 2022?
Well, for me, my whole thing is to really sort of take a step back from my organization. I'm getting closer every day. I know we talked on the show. I set my goal of July 23rd of next year to be totally out. I've been out of legal operations now this week. It's really kind of nice to take myself off of some email groups and out of some Slack channels, and that's been really kind of cool.
Well, a couple of questions. One, there are 2 things you seem to be removing yourself from. One is ops, the other is lawyering. And it's not, to a certain extent, it's not like you're saying, hey, I'm going to pull myself out of lawyering, let me still dabble with this. But is some of what you're doing the equivalent of sort of the cleanup that was done during COVID, which was, you'll do the cases you want to do if they're higher profile. If the delta between you and a different practitioner that you could train isn't that much different, why are you schlepping to court with the briefcase? And then on the flip side, were you at the point where you had too many direct reports, where you could actually, like what I've seen for myself, and I'll conclude with this thought, which is I realized both, it was more being hit over the head with this, that I'm not particularly good or patient. The ADHD and impatience has grown with age, and that I no longer can easily communicate with people. We had a situation I may have referred to on the show where I was like, I had a direct report that was a random salesperson at Blue Shark, outside of the ones that most of the people on the show know. And she was making nonsensical comments at a general meeting. And I had to, I was getting not nice about it. And I was like, why am she shouldn't be in the org chart near me. There should be somebody.
Right.
And it's part of what you're doing now, what you should have been doing, which is creating an org chart so you're not touching every piece of the firm.
So up until last week, everybody directly reported to me. It seemed. And so I was getting calls on cases. I was getting calls from support staff. I was getting calls and requests and questions from intake people, and I was ferreting through that. So now
What
that
are
we
you
have
down to now? So now, what are you down to?
now I have 4
theoretically?
direct reports.
Which is, look, 2 less than the max you should have anyway.
Right.
That it sounds, but the flip side, and we'll talk about this on the next show, so we don't go too long today, which is, okay, great, but now you're making people who are irreplaceable. I mean, again, I know with systems that shouldn't be the case, but okay, great. You're now saying, I'm not doing this. Short of you parachuting in, what do you do when one of your top deputies leave? It's something we've talked about in my cases, but sort of using this as a case study. Okay, great. You're doing what you should be doing. You got your direct reports down. But if each of these guys starts functioning on all cylinders, and 9-12 months from now, one of these guys, for whatever reason, isn't there, how is that going to upset your ability to execute your plan?
So the way that we're sort of looking at it is each one of those direct reports is responsible for going through, making sure the systems, their internal org chart is correct, all that stuff is taken care of. And so, God forbid, we're in a situation, whoever is next into that spot would have a playbook to run from. So it's like the New England Patriots, right? The offensive coordinator isn't there. Well, the quarterback and the entire offensive, offense has a playbook to work from. Somebody may be sitting in the booth, and it may be the quarterback's coach who is calling the plays this week because the offensive coordinator has COVID, but we have the same playbook that we're working off of. Yeah, that's the theory that we're working.
We will see. To me, look, better than most people because of your dedication to systems. But that question is, as you are stepping back, how much weight will go on to each of these people? And are you going to get to the point where, yes, in theory, somebody else can pick it up, but because that's what, for me, I have a few key employees, and we made considerations short of somebody being hit by, falling off a motorcycle. We're going to make sure they're never leaving us for money. And that's part of the reason, which dovetails to my last point, which was part of the reason I feel it's so important to make sure that we have some form of international component, because if we don't not just incentivize, but over incentivize our top line people, that's where the pain of that transition, once it's not you doing it, becomes that much greater. Right now, the pain was less because you were more in the trenches.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, think about it. If you had a key employee that you could keep for an extra $25,000 versus you having $150,000 worth of headache and work yourself, most people would say, "Oh, give them the extra 25." But in the short-sightedness of a lot of us who are building their firms, you say, "Well, I can spend that 25 on something else. I'll take that risk," right?
Right, and that's where I'm genuinely thinking on things like intake, where I'm like, hey, if I can save. Let's say the new normal is 60 all in for a legit intake person, at least in the major markets.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, if you can get that seat at 30, it's not a free lunch, but
no.
I need to be able to make sure that the person running that group, who's the person that means that I'm not sitting here scrambling or filling in, that there is somebody that we're able to pay the management people that much more and have that stability. To me, that's been sort of like, it makes me sleep better at night if we have some form of stability at the higher level and allow the other ones, when there's turnover, to happen.
And do you have overseas management that is overseeing them, and they are also overseas?
It's building out the way. I'll take CMT, for example, my intake group, where it started with just a domestic manager, but it's large enough now that the management is needed. And then we give this opportunity to promote people from there, where we're allowing somebody to be promoted as a team lead on one end, and then somebody else who's an Argentinian J who loves systems and loves making things more efficient, and allowing them to say, hey, this has made my life a lot more efficient. Let's roll. We're like, yes, let's do it, and roll that out for the rest of the team.
Awesome. I love it. All right. Well, we've been babbling long enough, and these people have other things to do, even though they love spending their time with us. So what we're going to do is we're going to call it a day today. But of course, if you want to catch up with Seth, you can always find him on his SEO Insider Show. Great stuff there every week that he's putting out there. So really sort of connecting with all the movers and shakers and the thought makers in the digital space. And it's a great way for you to learn a little bit more about these things that vendors will come and talk to you about. And of course, with me, if you want to know more about systems, systems, you can certainly join my Systemizing Your Law Firm for Growth Facebook group. You know, it's interesting. This week we actually had a brand new employee on Monday go home and test positive for COVID, vax and boosted, and got a Delta breakthrough. So we had to put our COVID policy back into effect, which I was able to copy and paste and share to everybody in the group. So, you know, we're still navigating the next normal. Who knows what 2021 will bring, but we're going to be here with you through it, folks. And we hope you join us every week here live on Maximum Growth Live, every week here, Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Pacific, and of course syndicated through Maximum Lawyer Media on the Maximum Lawyer podcast as well. So that's going to do it for us for now. Seth, any final words?
Have a great rest of the week, and see you next week.
See you next week, folks. Bye for now.